Michael Hiblin joins us. He's news director at KUAR Public Radio Central Arkansas. Lindsay Miller, editor of Arkansas Times. Price Dooley from the political science faculty at UCA. And thanks to everybody for coming in. Michael, you heard the discussion here. That agenda just keeps moving, regardless of the complaints or the arguments of Senator Elliott and the other opponents.
Yeah, a lot
Clearly
of
they've got the edge.
Yeah, a lot of items keep moving forward. We've had the suggestion that so far the legislative session has been dominated by guns and abortions. But yeah, a lot of issues still moving forward. We're just really getting to the meat of this session at this point, and a lot of key issues still to be decided.
Yeah, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, I think the senators touched on the philosophical issues. These bills are both going to pass. There's sort of no question about it.
Wind at their back.
Sure. The issue is they're both almost certainly unconstitutional. Senator Rapert's bill definitely is. I don't think you could find a legal scholar who would argue that it is constitutional. And so it's going to cost the state, all sorts of money. Representative Mayberry's bill, likely unconstitutional. It's before the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Most court watchers expect
a similar
bill, I should say, in Arizona. Most court watchers expect that to be overturned.
Price, what's at work here? Is this, I'm not doubting the sincerity in their objectives, but there's also, it would seem, a solidifying of the base out in the state. I mean, this plays well with hardcore opponents.
If I were an Arkansas voter, I'd sort of think about this sort of bait and switch sort of mentality that actually happened. When you look at the last election back in 2012, Republicans ran on jobs in the economy, jobs in the economy, jobs in the economy, and then they were sprinkling a little bit of Obamacare. So those three components. And yet the first thing that comes up in the legislative session are abortion-related issues, voter ID, things that weren't discussed in the previous segment, and it's really sort of fascinating in terms of they're running away from what they ran on to begin with.
Running away or just biding their time?
Well,
we're about to get some budget bills through here and some revenue bills through here, and I'm not sure that the administration's going to like them. But
well, the fiscal issues are a lot harder to go ahead and pass through the legislature. It takes a supermajority to go ahead and get those things done. And whereas Republicans do have that in the Senate, they do not have that in the House. And so they're going to have to sort of compromise, something they have not actually done to this point when you look at some of the bills that actually have gone through.
Revenue Stabilization Act's usually one of the budgets, usually the last thing, one of the very last things that gets passed.
Yeah, and that's going to be the key issue. We've got a proposal to cap spending at 3%, and whether or not that's going to go through. There have been some amendments passed on that, but that still is in the very preliminary stages at this point.
All right, we do have voter ID, as Price mentioned, as was mentioned in the interview. That is now a front burner issue, or in terms anyway of the dance of legislation. Anyway, Lindsay?
Yeah, really contentious hearing yesterday in a Senate committee where Senator Brian King, who's sponsoring this bill, put it forward. Ultimately passed, but not before Senator David Johnson questioned Senator King sharply, asking, really, what's this bill about? Do you actually believe that voter fraud is an issue? Isn't this about suppressing the vote? And that Senator King was very upset about that suggestion. But, Senator Johnson has a point that since 2000, I think there are only 6 documented cases of voter fraud, none for voter impersonation, because, of course, voter impersonation is not an efficient way to sway an election. Me pretending to be someone else, that's just not, you're not going to rack up votes that way.
Historically, in Arkansas, it's those that have been in charge of the mechanism of voting are the ones that have actually went ahead and instituted voter fraud, or candidates that are going and seeking office. Hadn't been the case, as Lindsay was alluding to, for a voter to actually go ahead and commit voter fraud. So there are some issues related to that. Again, it does seem to be sort of a cookie-cutter approach, some things that have passed in Republican legislatures in other states being applied to Arkansas. Just to go back just very, very briefly to the 3%.
Well, they would argue that nonetheless, that doesn't, even if that were the case, that doesn't invalidate them.
No.
From their standpoint.
No, not at all. But again, if it's jobs in the economy, Arkansas is a poor state. We're on the Human Development Index. We're 49th out of 50 states, and so it really is about strengthening the economy from that standpoint. And that's what they ran on. And we're looking at things that have nothing to do with the economy.
Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, well, King insisted that voter fraud is happening, but the opponents of this suggest, yes, it's a non-issue, that really the issue is absentee ballots, that's where you're really seeing fraud, and that the proposal would do nothing to actually address that. There was also the suggestion we need more poll monitors, that this voter ID bill will just disenfranchise the elderly and people who typically vote Democratic.
Well, some skepticism arises from those who support the voter ID that they're very simple. There aren't that many people eligible to vote who are registered who lack some sort of ID.
Very true, and they do ask for ID when you go to the polls. It's not a requirement, but every time I've gone to the poll, they ask me for my ID. And but yeah, most people do have an ID, but the ones who don't do typically vote Democratic. And the suggestion that maybe this is a way to shave off some votes for Democrats are being made by some people.
Yeah, Price? The ID, the matter of ID, those who don't have ID, is it substantial?
Well, I think as part of the bill that's being looked at, the state would have to go ahead and provide free IDs for citizens, which would also, of course, increase the cost of governing. So that's going, I think, to the tune of roughly about $300,000 to $400,000 per year now to go ahead and provide free IDs for citizens, so they'd have to go ahead and meet this requirement. It's sort of, when you think about our Republican form of government, we've got three different legs to it. We've got equal opportunity, liberty, and democracy. And it seems to me that this bill kind of flies in the face, if not all three of those, at least two of those components.
All right, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another instance where you see small government Republicans wanting to add a layer of bureaucracy and expense simply because it's one of their causes. You know, this kind of flies in the face of what you'd expect.
Well, we have another this session. We have, although this time we're going to go try the initiated route, and that's a tougher ethics code, much tougher ethics code than certainly now exists, but with a twist of lime atop the cocktail, and that's the term limits feature. Michael?
Yeah, we had Warwick Sabin, freshman representative, who filed a constitutional amendment on Wednesday, and he's trying to make this a bipartisan effort. He's working with Senator John Woods to try and come up with something that both sides can agree on. It does include some of the proposals from Renyat Populous, the gift ban, extending the cooling off period between the time when a former lawmaker can become a lobbyist from 1 to 2 years, and it also bans corporate contributions. But he's also trying to get some input from Republicans. Part of this includes having an independent panel set the salaries for state lawmakers, and also extending term limits in some form. But it's still very preliminary. He's working to try to find some kind of consensus on this, but he is taking an approach of trying to include both sides and seeing what can be agreed upon.
The bottom line here would seem to be being in the majority is fun.
Yeah. You know, in '92, when term limits were pushed through, that was a libertarian Republican push. Of course, Republicans were in the minority now. Now that they're in the majority, they're all about term limits, or changing term limits.
Well, this would extend service. Presently, it's 6, 8, 14 years. Well, depending on whether you're in the Senate and you get a lucky draw on a term, you could go longer. Basically, though, it's
3, 2 years.
Yeah, 12, 3 at 2 and 2 at 4.
Correct.
Well, this would extend this all the way almost to 20.
Correct.
Typically.
Correct. To me, it seems sort of like the initiative passed right from it passed the Attorney General. So as long as they can collect the signatures,
Yeah.
it'll be on the ballot in 2014. This is sort of maybe trying to go ahead and head that off at the pass. I think the only issue, though, the term limit thing seems to be a poison pill from that perspective, because by itself, ethics legislation will pass when you look at the different polling data that's actually been done among the Arkansas population. But Arkansans aren't too keen on extending the salaries for legislators, nor are they very keen on extending the terms of Arkansas legislators. So from that standpoint, to me, it seems like that would be a poison pill that would defeat this legislation if it actually is presented to the people.
Basically using a base closing commission type approach, though, on legislative salaries. Will that be enough, though, the extended terms, will that be enough to bring in the GOP's leadership, the GOP legislators, and even Democratic legislators for that much, in exchange for the tougher gift, for example, gift provisions?
Well, you've got Senator Woods has already signed on to this, and he's one of the more conservative. I think Representative Saban has said that he's open to compromise. This is a starting point, so we'll see how much of this initial what this initial slate stays.
It's a misnomer also. It's a misnomer as it relates to yes, it bans gift giving, but and contributions from that standpoint. But when you look at PAC contributions are not looked at all relative to this legislation.
Baby steps, baby steps. One other issue, a couple more actually, if we can squeeze them in, and that is scholarship cuts. Michael, not quite under one proposal, not quite as substantial as they were.
Yeah, and we had Bill Halter, the former lieutenant governor, the man who pretty much spearheaded this effort to get lottery scholarships passed in Arkansas, come out very much opposed to these cuts that are being proposed. And what's being suggested here is that you only give $2,000 for freshmen, increase by $1,000 each year. And part of the idea is that you have, it would be more of an incentive, and you wouldn't have quite the rate of students who are getting scholarships who aren't actually completing and getting their degree. But the former lieutenant governor put out a statement saying that this ignores the express intent of Arkansans by dramatically altering what they approved in 2008, saying it'll be significantly more difficult for students now. And there's also the suggestion this will be a negative impact for students at four-year institutions.
And what proponents are arguing, Lindsay, is that Mr. Halter, among others, is ignoring the fiscal realities of the lottery fund.
Sure, it's a smart political move for him to come against it, because this is a raw deal for Arkansas students, but it's a realistic reflection of where we are fiscally. The lottery is not done as well as projected, and there have been, on the other side of the coin, there have been more students achieving the required levels of achievement to get the scholarship. So what are you going to do? It's interesting to me that in this compromise, which at least has been put forth as something that involved two-year colleges, four-year colleges, Republicans, Democrats, people from all across the spectrum, that community colleges are really coming out better than anybody else. So yeah. You went from $2,500 for community colleges for both years down to $2,000, and then four-year colleges are taking a huge hit from $4,500 to $2,000, and then, as Michael said, incrementally going up. It makes it more about retention from the four-year, but two-year, it's sort of directing our maybe more marginal students into two-year institutions than to step up to four-year. So.
Yeah. Price, State of the Union last Tuesday, a very aggressive, traditional left approach by the agenda set out by the president. In a few seconds or less, how much cooperation can he expect from the Arkansas delegation?
Progressive
that 5-1 delegation.
Progressive liberal agenda coming from the president, with again a 5-1 delegation led by fairly Tea Party conservatives. So not much. Not much at all.
And with that, we're out of time. Now, with that big disclosure, we're out of time. Thanks to you for joining us. See you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and